Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Are you having a good January so far?
Well,
this comes out the 31st, so.
Yeah. Not as many snow days I would like. But of course, we could have 35 snow days. It still wouldn't be enough. So it doesn't matter.
I'm glad the worst is over. We got down to, 2 degrees here?
No, I think it was negative something, wasn't it?
Might have been negative on some days. I know at one point we woke up and because I had to put it into Celsius and it was like negative 15 Celsius and one was negative 18 or 19 Celsius.
Yeah.
So whatever that is in Fahrenheit, yeah.
It's bad.
But it was cold. There was like a thin thing of ice all over the thing. And a video went viral. I don't know if any of you saw it, but it was of a fire truck trying to go up a hill and then it like spinned and almost narrowly missed a house, but it went into a driveway. That's from our area. It was pretty scary. And actually my daughter's friend's father was the one driving that truck.
He did a pretty good job.
He did a great job.
Like he
couldn't have done it.
He snipped a car, but otherwise that thing would have went through that house and probably hurt somebody. So he did a pretty good job.
It was amazing.
Don't drive on ice. That's what we've learned.
It's horrible.
Never.
But now it's just been rainy for the past couple of days, and I'm ready for some sunshine.
Sunshine when I'm gone.
Should we get into this?
Let's
go. This is something that's been requested for a while. It was requested by Michelle Corcoran. I believe that's how she said her name, or how her name is pronounced. It's from our True Crime Podcast discussion page on Facebook. And I'm going to warn everybody, I'm working on 2 very poor nights of sleep. This case makes me cry. So if I cry through this, I will do our best to have most of it edited out. I can't guarantee it. So you might want to get Kleenex too, because it's they're all sad, but this one hit me in the gut. Let's just put it that way. This got me.
Sometimes they do. All
Here
right.
we go.
I'm ready. Let's go.
The sun peeked over the horizon at 7:05 a.m. in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, bathing the green, undulating hills in a warm glow. The day would go down as a picture-perfect autumn day, brilliant blue skies, cool temperatures, and the twinkling sun that signifies that the long, scorching hot days of summer are coming to an end. But in every other manner, the day would be remembered for the heartbreak and chaos that the community endured. It would also be remembered as when a small group displayed incredible compassion and benevolence. In fact, the day showed the entire range of human behavior, from the utterly vile to the impossibly divine. That morning, children filed into a one-room schoolhouse, excited for the day to begin. Boys and girls ages 6 to 13 took their seats. Their teacher, 20-year-old MMA Zook, was also excited to begin her day. Her family was thrilled that she decided to become a teacher. And that day, some of them, her mother and 2 adult sisters, and also a friend, had accompanied her to the school. They wanted to watch MMA do her job. And you know what? This isn't unusual for the community. There was a sign above the chalkboard that read, "Welcome visitors." And then there was another sign that said, "Visitors bring joy to our school." This was a typical one-room schoolhouse of days gone by. There was no electricity, phones, computers, or surveillance, and there wasn't even a security system. It was a cream wooden structure with a bell on top for ringing to signal the start of the day. A white picket fence surrounded the school and the grounds. There were 2 outhouses, one for the boys and one for the girls, and a baseball field where the children often played at recess. There was also a wood-burning stove that kept the children warm in the winter. But these weren't the bygone days of Little House on the Prairie. This was in 2006, and this was Amish country. About 30,000 Amish people are in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and at least 150 one-room schoolhouses. And while Amish communities can be found in 32 of the 50 United States, most of them, 2/3 of them, reside in Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Ohio. The Amish population grows about 3% every year due to high birth rates, averaging 7 live births to each Amish couple. And in 1972, the Supreme Court ruled that the Amish do not have to go to school beyond 8th grade, or to even attend a public school. Teachers within the Amish community don't even have to attend a college or hold a degree or have a license to teach. Anyone can teach. Now, the Amish live simply, as one might guess from the description of the West Nickel Mine School. Their lives are based on faith, community, and family. They typically speak 3 languages, which are English, Dutch, and German. They eschew modern conveniences like electricity, telephones, and cars, and they all dress similarly to each other. They wear dark pants, solid shirts, and wide-brimmed hats for the boys, mid-calf length skirts with a long-sleeve blouse and a bonnet for the girls. And one thing that sets them apart is the lack of ornamentation. I mean, there's no makeup, no jewelry, no embroidery or sequins. Very
simple.
Plain. Mm-hmm.
Very plain, yes.
And even though the Amish travel by horse and buggy, they will ride public transportation and shop at Walmart. Because we all love to shop at Walmart.
I didn't know that. They shop at Walmart, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you know.
I mean, they're not completely off from society. I mean, they do commingle. And this could be wrong, but I remember reading somewhere that they do have one phone in the village or their community just in case, right?
It's an emergency. Yes, right. I do believe that's correct.
But they don't use it. Just 1 mile away from the West Nickel Mine School, 32-year-old Charles Roberts IV, known as Charlie to his friends, was having a very different morning. The father of 3 was a milk truck driver for Bart Township, a rural farming community in Lancaster County. He had been married to his wife Marie for 10 years, and their children ranged in age from 18 months old to 6.5 years old. He was known as a total family man, always willing to help with the kids. And while they weren't part of the Amish community, the Roberts family were pretty religious. At about 8:45 a.m., Charles and Marie put their 2 children on the school bus. Charles had been homeschooled as a child, but his children attended public school. That morning, a neighbor heard Charles call out to his children to come back. They were on the bus, so Charles called them, to come back to him. And that was at the last minute because he wanted, quote, one last hug.
Aww.
And these hugs lasted longer than usual. And he said to them, quote, "Remember, Daddy loves you." In the months leading up to this day, coworkers and friends noticed a change in Charles. Even though he was normally quiet, he seemed off. He seemed quieter and more distant than normal. Charles had never been diagnosed with any mental illness, but privately, he battled with depression and anger over the loss of his firstborn child. 9 years prior, in 1997, a daughter, whom they had named Elise Victoria, was born 3 months prematurely, and she lived for only 20 minutes. Her lungs weren't developed, and other things. Charles was never able to cope with her death and sought no professional help either. Friends and coworkers noticed, however, that about a week before October 2nd, Charles was back to his normal self. So whatever had been bothering him, his friends just assumed that he had worked it out.
Mm-hmm.
Psychologists claim that the calm before the storm, the brief period when a perpetrator returns to behaving normally before committing a crime, usually indicates that they've made their decision regarding the upcoming offense. No longer in conflict with themselves.
Oh.
They are now at peace.
Mm.
So after Charles got the children on the school bus and his wife left the house to run errands, Charles Robert wrote 4 suicide notes. He wanted revenge against God, he said. The revenge was for the death of his daughter. God had let her die no matter how hard he'd prayed. Charles had loaded his truck with his supplies that he had carefully curated. 1 rifle, 2 handguns, 600 rounds of ammunition, gunpowder, knives, chains, wires, a stun gun, plastic flex ties, nails, boats, a hammer, and lumber. He also brought a change of clothes, candles, 2 tubes of the lubricant KY jelly, and a board with 10 large bolts on it. These items, bolts, like nuts and bolts, bolts. And these items were all on his handwritten checklist. Then Charles Roberts drove to the small school at 4876 White Oak Road and sat in his car across the street. It was a 2-lane road with farms and silos dotting the landscape as far as the eye could see. There, he sat and watched the children playing. Recess was over at 10:25 a.m., and Charles's time for observing was over. He backed his truck up to the school and entered. There was a moment of confusion when the teacher, Emma Mae Zook, looked up, startled at the outsider's presence in her schoolhouse. The children exchanged worried glances. Then, quietly, not making any eye contact, Charles asked if Emma Mae had seen a clevis pin. Now, this pin is kind of similar to the bolt, and it's used in construction. It's a U-shaped or forked metal connector, and that part can be fastened by means of a bolt with a pin passing through the ends. Emma Mae said no, she hadn't seen anything like that anywhere in the schoolhouse. So Charles looked around the room for a bit and then exited the building. Can you imagine?
No, I can't. And I'm
strange
fearful
man
of what's going to come here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you should be fearful. What Emma Mae didn't understand is that he had just taken a head count and he had gotten the layout of inside the building. He then returned moments later with his Springfield Armory XD 9mm handgun. Charles ordered the boys in the classroom to help him carry in his arsenal and supplies. At this point, Emma Mae, being near the back door, an exit, and having only seconds to think about what was happening, she realized that if she didn't get help, everybody would die. So she grabbed her mother, and the two women barreled out the back exit and ran as fast as they could to a nearby farmer's house. Within seconds, Charles realized that Emma Mae and her mother had escaped, and then he ordered one of the boys to chase after the women, telling them that if they failed to retrieve her, he would shoot everyone in the building. Charles ordered all of the children, including the boys, to line up in front of the chalkboard. Hearts thundered in their chest. Some of them began to cry. One of Emma Mae's sisters, Lydia, who was pregnant at the time, tried to soothe the children and tell them not to worry. Now, Charles is in a panic now. He hadn't expected Emma Mae to escape. The police would now arrive way sooner than he had anticipated, and he paced back and forth. The children cried softly. Some of them held their breath as to what was to come next. Then, abruptly, Roberts ordered all the boys and the remaining adult women out of the building. One little girl, Emma Fisher, also managed to sneak out of the schoolhouse by quietly slipping in between Lydia and the boys. That left Charles Roberts alone in the school with 10 girls. He ordered all of them to lie down face first on the floor, with the tops of their heads towards the chalkboard, and he tied their ankles with zip ties. He then took the lumber and nails that he'd brought and he boarded up all the windows in the front door. Emma Mae and her mother had successfully made it to the farmer's house, who immediately called 911. At 10:42 a.m., the first Pennsylvania trooper arrived on the scene. They asked Roberts to throw out his weapons and exit the schoolhouse. Roberts refused, demanding that the officers leave. They had a negotiator come in to call him, but he couldn't get through. The next 911 call to be made was by Charles Roberts himself. And in his 911 call, he told the operator to make the police go away. He then called his wife, who had just returned from running an errand, and told her that he wouldn't be coming back home, ever. Now, Marie was dumbfounded by this call and by the 4 suicide notes that she had found, and her mind couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Charlie had no criminal history, and he had never been clinically diagnosed with a mental illness. And even though he was a gun enthusiast, he had never shown any inclination towards violence either. Charles then went on to explain to her that he had molested 2 female relatives when they were children, and that he had been having dreams and recurring fantasies about doing that again.
He said that to his wife?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So after Charles hung up the phone with his wife, Marie called 911, worried that her husband was about to commit suicide. And at this point, Marie had no idea that her husband had taken 10 Amish girls hostage. Charles Roberts asked the girls in the school to pray for him, and some of them said that they would. Aside from Charles, the people left in the school at this time were 12-year-old Sarah Ann Stolfitz and her 6-year-old sister Anna Mae, Marion Fisher, 13, and her sister Barbara, who's aged 11. There was 7-year-old Naomi Rose Ebersold and Esther King, who was 13, 6-year-old Rosanna King, Rachel Ann Stolfitz, aged 8, and she was no relation to Sarah Ann or Anna Mae, and then Mary Liz Miller, aged 8, and 7-year-old Lena Zook Miller. Soon, a crowd of police, emergency medical technicians, and curious neighbors began to form on a 2-lane road. All the while, the police continued to try to get Charles to come out peacefully. Inside the building, the girls realized the fate that was awaiting them. Some prayed, some cried, while Charles was ranting about taking revenge on God. The Fisher sisters tried to negotiate with Charles from their place face down on the floor. 13-year-old Marion understood that the police had arrived. She thought that if she could stall the gunman, maybe she could save the other girls in the school. "Shoot me first," she said to him. "Please shoot me first." A pregnant pause filled the room. Nobody will ever know what was going through the mind of Charles Roberts at this moment. But then Marion's 11-year-old sister Barbara said, "Shoot me second." I mean, was he at all moved by these acts of bravery?
No.
Did he comprehend that these young girls' final moments, terrified and knowing that they were going to die, that these girls' last thoughts were about saving each other? And then a shaky third voice said, "Me next."
Mm-hmm.
Ugh, fuck. They're babies.
Because those little innocent babies are good. They have goodness in them. They don't know evil yet. That's the thing.
Well, and it's their community, too. At 11:07 a.m., Charles Roberts granted Marion's wish and shot her first in the back of the head, execution style. He proceeded to shoot 2 more girls in the same manner. The police stormed the building and busted the window. They tried prying the wood from the window frame and the door that Charles had just hammered into place a few minutes before. At this point, Charles shot the remaining girls as quickly as he could and then turned the gun on himself. He died instantly. The coward. Janice Ballinger, deputy coroner of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, said, quote, "There was not one desk, not one chair in the whole classroom that was not splattered with either blood or glass. There were bullet holes everywhere." Ballinger was so overwhelmed by what she saw that upon counting at least a dozen shotgun pellet-inflicted wounds in one child alone, she asked a colleague to take over and continue for her because she couldn't. In total, Roberts shot at least 14 rounds from his handgun and at least 3 blasts from a shotgun, and one of those blasts was at police, but the police never returned fire. When it was all said and done, 5 girls died from the injuries inflicted on that day. Mary Liz Miller, aged 8, Zena Zook Miller, aged 7, Anna Mae Stolfitz, aged 6, Marion Fisher, aged 13, and Naomi Rose Ebersol, aged 7. One of the 5 girls survived long enough to die in the arms of a state trooper. 6-year-old Rosanna King lived, but she was injured so badly that today she can't walk, talk, or feed herself. The remaining 4 girls would make full physical recoveries except for Sarah Ann Stolfitz, who permanently lost the vision in one eye. In the aftermath of this tragedy, the ultimate question is, why would Charles Carl Roberts IV do this? He never gave the impression of being unbalanced or on the edge, nor did he have a criminal record. Investigators pored over his suicide notes and interviewed those who knew him well. Roberts had told his wife in the last phone call he had made her that he had molested 2 family members when they were 3 and 5 years old, and that would have made him about 12 at the time. And he confessed to her that he had been having dreams and fantasies of doing that again. And now on the pre-made checklist of things for him to take to the Amish school that day were 2 tubes of KY jelly and candles. Investigators soon believed that before shooting the girls and himself, Roberts had planned to rape them. But his plans were foiled when the teacher, Emma Mae Zook, escaped and called 911 within minutes of Roberts entering the building. And it was obvious to law enforcement that Charles Roberts had planned a long siege. I mean, with 600 rounds of ammunition, that's pretty much a guarantee. Only when investigators questioned the family, they said that no such molestation had ever taken place. The 2 girls he mentioned in his confession to his wife both denied that Charles Roberts had ever molested them. it could be possible that as young as the girls were at the time, they just don't remember it. And it also could be true that for whatever reason, Roberts changed the name of his victims. Or he could have made it all up.
Well, it could have been a delusion, too.
I know.
Like if he was mentally ill, it could have just been a delusion, in fact, that he thought it did happen.
Right. And if it wasn't a delusion, why would he make it up? I don't know. But then why would he have taken the candles, the board with 10 large bolts on it, and the KY jelly to a school shooting, if his plans were not to assault them sexually?
Yeah.
And did the change of clothes indicate that he had originally planned to get away?
Yes, because I think she escaped, and that was not part of his plan, that he would have some time in there to do as he pleased. And it's, nope.
I mean, it is possible that Roberts could have had two motives. On one hand, there's that angry at God motive for not saving his daughter. And then the other hand, the desire to relive two sexual assaults that he committed when he was 12. But neither one of them seemed to account for his actions fully. The one thing that most investigators agreed on was that they didn't believe Charles Roberts had a grudge against the Amish. The Amish were just easy targets. Their school had no security, no surveillance, nor phone. It was close to his residence, but it was also isolated. And what's more, being pacifists, the Amish were unprepared for this type of assault. And that made this so much easier. They didn't even understand what the term execution style meant. The police had to explain it to them. Just hours after 10 girls from their community had been brutally shot, the Amish did what the Amish do best. They practiced what they preached. A group of them showed up to the home of Marie and Charles Roberts on that very evening. When their world had been torn into two, reeling from grief, they went to visit and comfort Marie Roberts, the wife of the man who was responsible for killing their children. They made her dinner.
Oof.
They told her that they didn't hate her husband and they didn't hold her responsible in any way, and they forgave Charles. That blows my mind.
That's what they believe in, though. And it is true. It's not the wife's fault. Maybe there's some signs she missed.
Sorry.
Nobody
would ever
think this is coming.
Nobody goes from depressed husband to thinking that he's going to shoot up a school. Another group went to Charles Roberts' parents' home that same evening. They took them food. They prayed for them. They offered them condolences on the loss of their son. And they spoke the words, "We forgive Charles." And when Charles' father, a retired police officer, began to cry, uncontrollably cry, one of the Amish men stepped forward and held him for over an hour while he wept. That's amazing to me.
It's unfathomable that there's people with such goodness in their heart.
So much forgiveness. I can't forgive my parents for not giving me a car on my 16th birthday. You know what I mean? The 5 Amish girls were buried wearing handmade white dresses, lying in caskets made by their relatives, and the graves were dug by men of their community. There was a no-fly zone issued so that the community could hold their funeral without the media buzzing around. Within days, the West Nickel Mine School was torn down in the middle of the night, and 5 trees were planted nearby in memory of the girls. The land is now a peaceful pasture. A new school was built on a new location that opened 6 months later. When it came time for the perpetrator of this nightmare, Charles Robert IV, to be buried, first of all, they had a hard time finding somebody who would do anything with his body.
Provide services.
Yep. So when it came time for him to be buried, the Amish came out in support of his family. Having just buried 5 of their own children, they surrounded Robert's wife and his mother, and they were the first to offer condolences. Actually, it was kind of like a media circus, and Terry, the mother, said that right before the service started, there was a line of 40 Amish people in the community. They came out and kind of made a barrier so the media couldn't film them. But the grace of the Amish didn't stop there. Their community doesn't accept outside monetary help, but in this case, they had to. I mean, they needed to rebuild the school, they needed to pay for funerals and for medical expenses because they don't carry insurance. That's not part of their way. But after receiving money from the community, the Amish portioned off an amount for Marie Roberts and her children. Marie released a statement that said, quote, "Your love for our family has helped to provide the healing we so desperately needed. Gifts you've given have touched our hearts in ways no words can describe. Your compassion has reached beyond our family, beyond our community, and it's changing our world, and for this we sincerely thank you." Investigators had come to the terms with the fact that they'll probably never know why Charles Roberts did what he did. But it is interesting to note that some believe that Roberts had been inspired by another shooting.
Which
Just
one?
Well, I'm about to tell you.
Ugh, fired
Hold
up.
your horses. Just 1 week before the killings in Amish country, an incident played out in Bailey, Colorado in Platte Canyon High School, where 53-year-old Dwayne Roger Morrison took 7 female students hostage. Morrison entered a classroom, pulled out his handgun, and ordered the teacher, all the teen boys, and several teen girls to leave. He then ordered the remaining 17 girls to line up against the chalkboard in front of the class. Those remaining were all sexually assaulted, and over the next few hours, most of them were released. When Morrison was down to 2 hostages, the police stormed the classroom. Morrison shot one of his hostages, who later perished from her injuries, and then he died from a combination of shooting himself and being shot by police officers. The similarities between the Platte Canyon shooting and the West Nickel Mines shooting can't be overlooked. Even the things that Morrison packed for his siege were similar to those that Roberts packed: the duct tape, the handcuffs, knives, stun gun, ropes, scissors, massage oil, sex toys, a Glock, a .357 Smith & Wesson, and numerous rounds of ammunition. Some investigators believe the similarity between the two incidences were coincidental, and they believed this mainly because Charles Roberts' behavior had changed months before the shooting in Bailey, Colorado. And it could be that he was planning to do something at the West Nickel Mine School for months, and the Platte Canyon High School shooting tweaked his game plan. But nobody will ever know. It's highly unlikely that Roberts went about his business the last week without hearing about the incident in Colorado, though. The family who lost their children that day and the family and friends of Roberts are not the only victims. First responders to the scene had tried to deal with the memory of seeing 10 little bloody girls lying on the floor of that school under the welcome visitors sign. They've tried to forgive themselves for not being able to save all of them. The Amish refer to the shooting that took place on October 2nd as the happening. And even though the Amish forgave the perpetrator, that didn't erase their nightmares. Years later, their sense of security was not returned. The boys who helped carry in the guns, ammo, and building supplies, and then ultimately left go, suffered from PTSD and survivor's guilt. For a long time, Aaron Esch Jr. was tormented by the idea that he could have somehow saved his classmates. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, he could barely function and suffered severe panic attacks. He lived in fear that something like this would happen again, and anytime there was news of another shooting, like the one in Virginia Tech, he would be hit hard with all the emotions all over again, and then he wouldn't eat. Aaron grew 4 inches in the months after the shooting, but lost 30 pounds. He ended up in a secured hospital ward, close to death from starvation. Aaron Esch Jr. credits 3 state troopers with saving his sanity. When they visited him, they told him that what happened at the school was not his fault, and if he had tried to intervene, the outcome probably would have been a lot worse. Until he heard those words, Aaron had been unable to forgive himself. Many people were critical of the Amish for their public forgiveness. Many felt that no forgiveness should be given if there was no remorse. The Amish would be the first to tell you that just because you speak the words of forgiveness doesn't automatically remove the bitter and dark thoughts. It's a struggle to stay constant. It's an ongoing evolution. It's a lifelong process. But the point is that they try, and they're willing to forgo vengeance. It doesn't undo the tragedy of what happened, but it builds a foundation of hope, and it paves the way for healing. And in fact, there was in one article, one of the men says that if Charles had lived, that they would have wanted justice served, and they would have saw justice being served, but they would have not wanted the death penalty. The amazing part in all of this is that the Amish has managed to control the narrative 18 years after the fact. They didn't achieve that by empty, uninspired tweets or Facebook posts. They've achieved it by their action. The story or case, they're the thing that everybody talked about and still talks about the most, is them. Their kindness and their forgiveness is what's being spoken about. The story isn't about the monster anymore. Charles Roberts' family still grapples with what happened that day. They simply can't square up the man they knew from the man who carried out the attack. They knew him as gentle, happy, and totally devoted to his family. His mother, Terry Roberts, who passed away in 2017, wrote a book about her experience. It's called Forgiven, The Amish School Shooting, A Mother's Love, and a Story of Remarkable Grace. In the 10 years that Terry lived after the shooting, she spent time helping other survivors of school shootings and their family. She gave inspirational lectures, and she made sure that she shared her story of surviving this tragedy. The Amish believe that harboring anger and resentment is corrosive. Quote, "It'll eat you up," Aaron Esch's father said. And if we are all to believe that Charles Roberts murdered 5 little girls and injured 5 others as revenge against God for allowing his daughter to die, then it would seem as though Aaron Esch's words are correct. Charles Roberts was unable to let go of his anger and resentment, and it devoured him. So yeah, that's it. I'm sorry I cried. It's really hard.
And
it's very touching. Those little girls, babies offering themselves innocent. To save time or to save others. It's amazing.
And they did. So, and as far as holding a grudge against God, it's mental illness. It's plain simple. You know what I mean? He could be upset about that, but nobody goes to a school and shoots up babies. Nobody shoots anybody unless,
How is that revenge?
Yeah, there's something wrong.
It's not revenge of God. How do you revenge God?
He's mentally ill, obviously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
or how do you revenge against God, I should say. This one was a hard one. Very hard.
Well, you can't wrap your head, none of it. You can't wrap your head around any of that because as a human, as a compassionate person that we all are for the most part, you don't understand that. And those little babies, they're just innocent and sweet. And,
they never knew violence.
Yeah, they don't, but they knew that's something, but I don't know if they really, the older kids do kind of look out for little kids. And I'm sure that they thought, okay, I don't know. There's no words. You can't understand this.
Horrible. Thanks for requesting this, Michelle, but damn. I'm telling you, and I was talking to Loretta. She does the writing and everything. She said that there was times she was writing this and she'd have to come out of her office and go to her husband and say, quick, tell me a joke. Just tell me anything. Get my mind off this. She said she'd be making her bed and just start crying. And then when I was reading over it and then reading the articles and all, the same. I've been crying. This is horrible. They're all horrible, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm
harder though. It is. It's some, and it depends on what's going on in your life, how you can relate to it. You haven't had a lot of sleep lately, and it's just anything that involves a child.
I don't know if I might have said this on the show before, but when my daughter was in kindergarten, they had a school shooting, or not a school shooting. They had a drill, intruder drill, and they didn't tell anyone that it was a drill. They played it off as it was the real thing. And
not okay.
She was first grade, maybe. My daughter was behind her backpack sobbing, thinking that she was never going to see us again.
It's awful. It's not okay.
And we went for 2 years to therapy because of it. She would have breakdowns to try to go to school. It was hell. It was utter hell. And that's nothing compared to the parents that, I don't know. I can't talk about it anymore. I can't.
Well, you did a good job. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle,
for requesting that.
I honestly knew about this, but I never knew the details of it. And it's even more horrifying than what I thought.
Sometimes. Yeah, and anyway. I just think a lot of stuff. I'll just leave it at that. Well, Jen, I think you did a really good job. That was a
great too.
Hard job to deliver and to write, I'm sure. So kudos to both of you.
So anyway, that's it. That's all I've got. I think I'm going to go get a drink.
Hard stuff? Hard cider?
I think I might add
Mimosa?
some sugar to my tea.
There you go.
Yeah.
You go, girl.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, good job. And to everybody out there, thanks for listening. And remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from Octoberpod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.